Okay, so moving on to last but not least, a talk by Dr. Lucy Mitchell on tracking our flying visitors, a Motus automated VHF network in the UK. So are you ready to go, Lucy?
I am, yeah. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, that's fine, yeah.
Okay, it's going to... Right. Does this show you my presentation? Can you see that?
Yes, perfect.
Excellent. Good. Right.
Excellent.
First hurdle. Oh well. Thanks very much to Jackson and Darren for inviting me to talk about this. It's really exciting to kind of get to enthuse about what I work on for 15 minutes. So yeah, thanks to them for inviting me along. I'm a postdoc at the University of Hull, and I actually did my PhD at the University of York, and I GPS tagged nightjars to look at habitat selection and home ranges on the Humber-wide peatlands, so Thorne and Hatfield Moors down near Doncaster. Some of you might know it. So yeah, another site close to the Humber. Now I don't actually really work on a specific species. I kind of work in a very facilitatory role. I'm working on the Motus automated VHF network, trying to kind of expand the network and encourage people to kind of take it up and use it as a method of research, and trying to do my own research with it. And I'll talk about kind of a little bit about what I'm trying to do with the network at the moment. So this is kind of roughly what I'm going to talk about. We're just going to kind of, I mean, you've kind of heard about tracking already. So you've heard about GPS tracking one specific species, so curlew. I'm going to talk about smaller creatures, what we kind of need to know about them, why it's really important to know various things about their movements, their migration. And then I'm just going to talk about the system. So what is Motus? What's the kind of state of it at the moment in the UK, and what it might be useful for, and how we can get a lot out of it. So yeah, as you've just heard, you know, we can GPS track curlew, we can GPS track big birds really quite well now. We know quite a lot about them. The technology is great, but we actually don't know a lot about smaller species. So often the weight of these small birds and mammals, flying mammals, so bats particularly, their weight is just too low. So we can't apply a tag to them without kind of affecting them detrimentally. But we're lacking some really valuable knowledge on these species. So that a lot of our passerines, our migrating passerines and our migrating bats have undergone huge declines over the last couple of decades. So I think of the Palearctic migratory species, so the birds that migrate from Europe down to Africa, 40% of those have shown substantial negative trends over the last 3 decades. And that's a really substantial portion of our migratory birds. You know, they're threatened by so many different things. So climate change, you know, it's changing the kind of time that they migrate at. It's mismatching them with their prey. You know, we're losing their habitat. So things like deforestation and development, even things like wind farms. You know, we know that they can kind of create a barrier to these migrating species. And we've got the turtle dove up here. We know that they've undergone huge declines because of a kind of a combination of these factors. But these species are so important. They provide really important ecosystem services. So a lot of our small birds and our bat species are they're pest regulators and they're pollinators. So you might see these birds in your garden and kind of you know, you kind of maybe can't appreciate how important they are to our ecosystem processes. So we really need to understand not only the declines, but how we can deal with those. One of the ways that we can do that is by understanding where they're going, when they're going from breeding to wintering grounds, how long it takes, what the kind of main drivers are, and are these species flexible? Is there habitat available for them? Can they adapt? And we talk about kind of migratory connectivity. So this is just a map of so I think the raptor species. It's really bad that I can't remember which one it is. But so when we talk about migratory connectivity, this ability of species to adapt their migratory routes. So are their breeding locations really tightly with their wintering locations? So does one entire breeding population from one country go to a single wintering location, or actually, hypothetically, if that wintering location disappeared, would some of that population be able to move to a different wintering location? Things like that. We need to understand whether species are able to do that or not. In February last year, we had the Conference of the Parties to the Convention of Migratory Species. So this is a big meeting of various nations that have kind of signed up to the Convention of Migratory Species, understanding that migratory species are important for various ecosystem processes, and they're culturally very important as well. You know, they bring people a lot of pleasure. They're important sort of part of our recreation. And they have a few specific resolutions, which I'm just going to pick out here, that will then lead on to Motus. So there's the improving ways of addressing connectivity and the conservation of migratory species. And I'm just going to highlight this bit here. They specifically recommend that parties to the convention, so all of the different nations that are involved, that they disseminate and deploy a large number of energy efficient and low cost radio base stations coupled with radio transmitters. And this is essentially what Motus is. I also thought I would just highlight the African Eurasian Migratory Landbirds Action Plan, which was renewed at COP13 last year, and that really encourages people to develop existing and establish new international and local collaborative projects. And this again is exactly what Motus does. So I'm going to talk about what Motus is and how it can kind of fulfill these aims and give us the information about our migratory species that I was talking about before. So let's talk Motus. This is the current distribution of our Motus receiver stations in Europe at the moment. So you can see there are a few in the UK and quite a substantial number now on the coast of the Netherlands and up into Germany particularly. You can also see where there are lots of gaps. Ideally, we will be able to fill those gaps quite soon. So Motus wildlife tracking system, it began in Canada. It's actually driven by Birds Canada, kind of in collaboration with Low-Tech. They make a lot of the VHF, the radio transmitters that we already use on birds and bats in Europe. So Motus is all about this big collaborative approach. So you can set up these static receivers, which it basically just consists of a kind of circuit board in a box, and then that is connected to these antenna. It's all kind of standard radio, like amateur radio telemetry equipment. These antennas point in as many different directions as you like. You don't have to have 4, you can have 3, you can have 5. They connect to your receiver, and these are essentially on their own passive listening stations. So they sit there in the same location, maybe a key migratory hotspot or a key breeding location, and they can pick up the unique kind of coded emissions from these VHF Motus tags. So they are essentially able to identify individual birds as they fly past the receivers. So Motus is it started in Canada, and as you can see, it has been taken up in Europe quite substantially, and it's actually I think it's present and being used in 31 different countries. We've got more than 1,000 stations across the world, 235 different species, more than 25,000 individuals have already been tagged using this system. And so this is just to give you a kind of an idea of what the data kind of look like, or end up being translated into. So the tags kind of emit a really a completely unique pulse with a code in, and that identifies the individual as it passes kind of each receiver station, and it is translated by the Canadian processors into these lovely maps, which are free to view on the Motus website. So you can go and have a look now. You can click on each receiver station and see how many different individuals each station has detected, and then you can see a map of where the bird or the bat has actually gone. So this was a bird. This was a Wheatie that was tagged on the island of Helgoland, so the little dot in the middle of the sea off Germany, that's the island of Helgoland. There's lots of migratory bird research that goes on there. So the Wheatie was tagged there in April 2020, and then it actually moved south into Germany, kind of bimbled around there for a bit, and then it went west southwest and ended up being detected on the coast of Suffolk. So we don't know what happened to it after that, because we have so few receiver stations in the UK. But I think there was some assumptions from the German team that this was a kind of northern or Greenland breeding Wheatie, and it was then going to go north up through the UK. This is a map of Starling, and this was a Starling that was really recently detected. I think December 2020. I think I can't quite remember exactly what date it was, but it was detected at Landguard Bird Observatory in Suffolk. It's really close to Felixstowe. So you see the Starling was tagged in the Netherlands, and so there's a really nice dense network of receiver stations, and the Starling is shown to move south down the coast of the Netherlands, and then it crosses the channel. And then we've got another one. This was a white throat. No, it wasn't. Was it a robin? I think it was a robin. Sorry, I should have labelled them. It's bad organisation. So this is a robin that was tagged on Helgoland, that kind of moved inland onto mainland Germany, and then went back on itself and came all the way southwest to Sandwich Bay Bird Observatory. That's in Kent, and that's one of our newest receiver stations in the UK that we installed February last year. So you can see it's detected at Sandwich Bay, and it was detected for 4 hours at the receiver. Sometimes you get you get detections that are kind of registered for a full day, so maybe 8 to 12 hours, particularly if the bird's, it's made a really long journey. Sometimes you only get them detected for maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then if they're kind of 5 minutes or shorter, you kind of end up getting quite a few false detections, and you have to kind of weed out the ones that you don't think are true. But this robin was at Sandwich Bay for 4 hours, so but you can see it wasn't detected in the interim from being in mainland Germany and coming all the way down to the UK. That doesn't mean it just made one big long flight from the coast of Germany there. It will have gone, presumably, probably, most likely, it will have gone down the coast, but the receiver stations detect really well to a range of about 5k, maybe to 7k on a really good day, maybe even to 10 kilometers away. But if the bird doesn't pass within that distance of any of these receiver stations, then it won't end up being detected. So just a brief rundown of what we've got in the UK at the moment. We've got 7 receivers. 4 of these are at UK bird observatories. 3 of them were actually funded by a Dutch university, Wageningen. the 4 in UK bird observatories are kind of under this moniker, the Project Yellow-browed Warbler. So this was really kicked off by Spurn Bird Observatory, and also through the Bird Observatories Council. Lots of keen people really wanting to understand this kind of range expansion and reverse migration of yellow-browed warblers, so really small passerine species that breeds in Siberia, well, and all across kind of all across Russia, and normally they would migrate south into Asia, but they are being seen more and more on particularly on the east coast of the UK, right down actually over into Wales, and down into Cornwall. It's a real hotspot for them, and so there's a lot of research to be done there about why that's happening. So I haven't spoken much specifically about the Humber, but you know, we have this receiver at Spurn. It's a really key migration hotspot. The Humber is fantastic for migrating birds, wintering birds. We've already heard about how many fantastic wading species we get here. So this is this title here is the title of a Heritage Lottery Fund bid that I submitted recently in January to create a kind of regional Yorkshire network. So what's happened in the US and in Canada, their network is nationwide now, but it was kind of kicked off by regional groups setting up small arrays of maybe a dozen or so receivers. And being able, when you've got that many receivers, you can conduct a wintering study or a breeding study, maybe a post-juvenile dispersal study, something like that, with these small groups, and they then all go on to contribute to this nationwide network, because they're all monitoring on the same frequency. That's why, so we can detect the European birds, and they can detect our birds when we eventually start deploying tags. So I probably don't have to tell you that we have so many fantastic natural heritage sites in this region. Yorkshire's it's a fantastic place for nature. There a lot of these sites are kind of embedded within urban and industrial networks, and a lot of the key sites are along rivers. So the Humber estuary itself, leading into the Ouse, into the Dearne, the Derwent, the Aire, and the Calder. Really fantastic kind of urban or ex-industrial heritage sites. So this bid is actually a joint one with the North and East Yorkshire Ecological Data Centre. We have support from the Nature Partnership, the Yorkshire Marine Nature Partnership, and lots of local bodies as well. And we're hoping to kind of create this regional array of Motus receivers. And it hopefully it might look something a little bit like this. I've just highlighted a few of the really key sites that it would be. Some of these, we've kind of agreed we can already put a receiver at. Some of these are really key sites that would fit really well into the network. And once we've kind of got this regional array, that will allow us to hopefully start to deploy tags on things like wading birds, and the ones that breed further inland and migrate down after breeding to the coast and to the estuary. The orange dots show you where the existing receivers are. So we've got the one at Spurn down at Kilnsey, and then the other one technically doesn't actually exist yet. It's going to be at Weldrake Ings. All of the things are in place for it to be installed, but because of COVID, yet again, we haven't actually been able to complete that. So, but that will be our kind of next newest receiver, as a fantastic wildfowl wader migration site along the Ouse. And so one of the really great things about Motus is that because all of the data is kind of these maps and the kind of receiver network, it's all free to view online. It's really it's a really great way to kind of engage people in migration. I think there's a lot of potential here for some really good citizen science projects, some really great public engagement projects. The sites that contain these receivers, showing people the data, the things that they've detected, you know, understanding, like seeing the birds that we've already detected from Germany and from the Netherlands, you know, that's really exciting. You know, it's a really collaborative project. It's a really, you know, it focuses on open access software and you know, I think there's a lot to be said for it, for really kind of increasing involvement and care in kind of our natural heritage sites and our migrating species. I just thought I'd kind of show you an example of what I mean by a regional array. So this is one of the really key regional projects in the US. As I said, they really started off by creating these regional arrays, and so these are a variety of organisations that have put contributed both financially and in other resources to the Northeast Motus collaboration, and they manage collectively. They manage the infrastructure, they manage the research, and they manage the finances around this regional array of Motus stations on the east coast of the US. This just shows you the size of the tags and the size of the bird that they can go on. So these tags are sub half gram tags. So I think Lucas mentioned their GPS tags start at a gram. So that obviously precludes quite a lot of species already, because we work to a 3% body weight limit. The tags that we're going to be using hopefully this spring are 0.26 of a gram. So these are tiny tags. And that really means that we can start looking at a bunch of species that we've never worked on before, and bat species, which are of course really tiny, and we know almost nothing about their migration. So I've already alluded to some of the benefits of Motus. It's collaborative, it's open access, it is also affordable, and anyone can host a receiver. You know, and it just, even if you don't undertake any tagging work, any ringing work at your sites, you can host a receiver. So we generally work to about £3,500 expenditure cost for the equipment and installation of a receiver. So there are a variety of different things that you have to buy, and if you are interested, if you manage a site, or if you work with an organisation that would be interested in hosting a receiver or more than one receiver, I can help you do that. I can provide all the information. And I really believe that it kind of, not only does it involve the site in something so much bigger than itself, you know, you can really start talking about connectivity, you know, how your site feeds into a network of sites, but it increases the resilience of the site, you know, and maybe the resilience of the funding and the longevity of the funding. You know, you're contributing something. These receivers can stay there for, I mean, kind of hoping indefinitely. But the receiver, it's very low maintenance. You know, you could be talking about contributing to maybe a decade's worth of research and being involved in something long term. And I also said, I think I mentioned post-juvenile, post-breeding dispersal. You know, these don't have to be just for migration studies. You know, once we've got a regional array in Yorkshire, we can look at post-breeding dispersal. I really think that's quite an important area. Post-juvenile dispersal, we've always been quite nervous about putting tags on juvenile birds that are leaving their breeding area, and I really think Motus could give us some information there. It could also help us. I've put wildlife health. I'm kind of thinking about things like avian influenza, looking at the dispersal of birds and trying to understand infection patterns and things like that. And also, I think it could really contribute to areas like planning and habitat use. So yeah, we've got this plan to kind of create this regional array in Yorkshire. I think the Humber itself has so much potential. You know, we've talked about a lot of the interesting sites. You know, you've heard about the great wader sites. There's a lot of useful kind of wader movement research that could be done with Motus. You know, if we have enough receivers along the estuary at key sites, I think we could end up creating quite a nice map of wading bird movements. You know, I'm concentrating on things like that at the moment, and hoping that these kind of regional arrays will eventually kind of construct a national network. So, you know, I've put east coast of the UK network. This is our continent facing coast. You can see how dense the receiver network is in Europe. And, you know, I hope that we can kind of work with our European colleagues and kind of contribute to their data, and you know, they can contribute to our research as well. In terms of kind of particular species, so I've mentioned yellow-browed warbler, so we've got Project Yellow-browed warbler. At the moment, we are not permitted to tag yellow-browed warblers, but we're waiting for an even smaller Motus tag that's going to be 0.14 of a gram. That is hopefully something that we'll be able to use on yellow-browed warblers, hopefully maybe even from next year. We've got some funding to work on European blackcaps. So these are a species that have really rapidly evolved their migratory route in the last few decades. And we're going to be using Motus tags at the bird observatories that have got receivers currently to look at their migratory direction using Motus tags. Twite, I think, are a really key species with quite distinct breeding and wintering grounds within the UK. So we could look at post-breeding and post-juvenile dispersal, and links between breeding and wintering locations of a bird that's declined quite rapidly. I have a personal interest in turtledoves and nightjars, and I really think there's quite a lot of post-juvenile, post-breeding dispersal stuff that could be done there as well. But, you know, there are loads of species that are already tagged in Europe, so we could start contributing to a big data set there. So things like robins and wheatears, and yes, they already tag blackcaps in Europe as well. But this doesn't come without its challenges. Obviously, funding is always a challenge, and that's something I'm working quite hard to provide for the project. Finding sites where we can host receivers. We work currently on a frequency that is the same as the European frequency, but we only have a temporary license for it. So there are lots of kind of little hurdles that we've had to overcome to get to this point. But I feel really positive about the contribution that this kind of thing could make to migration research and movement research in the UK. You know, creating a network along somewhere like the Humber. You know, we could start to get some information from species that we haven't either been able to tag or been able to tag for long enough, or enough individuals, because of the prohibitive cost of things like GPS units and things like that. So yeah, as I mentioned, if you'd like to host a receiver, you are very much encouraged to do so, and please do get in touch if you'd like some help in kind of going about that. But also, if you've got some ideas for species that you think would be really interesting to tag, please do let me know. And yeah, if you just any other ideas, thoughts, comments and things like that, please just get in touch. And that's it from me.
Thank you very much, Lucy. That was a great presentation, and there's lots of questions coming in. So we're running a bit late, so maybe if we can just spend a few minutes doing questions. A couple of questions I think you've already answered. So there's a question from Louise Hudson on, are there more receiver stations planned? So I guess you've covered that already. And also the question about the setup costs and annual running costs, I guess you've covered that too, from Andrew Chick. So Jim Wright asks, is there any data on how migratory passerine birds or bats interact with wind turbines, either offshore and onshore? And I guess related to that, is it feasible to attach the equipment to towers of wind turbines?
Yeah, so yeah, it's a great question, and it is something that myself and colleagues at different organisations are kind of looking into. So in theory, it is feasible to attach equipment. It hasn't really been done. There are lots of issues with retrospectively installing equipment onto turbines for a variety of reasons that I, as a non-engineer, do not fully understand. So I won't pretend to. But it is something that we really want to see happen over the next few years, the next decade or so. so I mean, at the moment, no, there isn't really a lot of data at all about how migrating passerines or bats interact with wind turbines. I think there might be a small amount of research from the US, possibly, but there certainly isn't any from Europe. I think the closest we've got to installing receivers on something like a wind turbine, there are some specific offshore research platforms off the coast of Germany and Denmark, and there's a receiver off the coast of Belgium on a I think it might be on a wind farm substation, electricity substation, which might be the direction we go in until we can figure out how to put them on wind turbines.
Okay, just another couple of quick questions. Andrew Gibson asks, do the receivers need to be on a feeding site rather than just in a location where a bird passes?
No, they can kind of be anywhere, really. They do, so the one at Spurn is outside of the observatory building. Because they've got quite a good reach, they can kind of be anywhere. They need a good line of sight. If they're at a feeding site, it increases the chances that a bird will be detected, because the bird will presumably be there for a bit longer. But no, it could be on a headland. So Flamborough Head is somewhere where we're looking at trying to put a couple of receivers. You know, it could be, you could put a couple on the Humber Bridge. In theory, you could put 2 on each peak of the Humber Bridge, and they would still detect birds flying over if they were close enough. So they can be in any location, really.
Excellent. Just one final question. Let me have a look. How precise can the location data be?
So yeah, it's not as precise as something like a GPS tag. So if the bird is within range of the receivers, and it can be picked up, you will get, when you translate the data, when I look at the raw data, I can see a series of dots. If there are multiple antennae, I can see dots from like the strength of the signal on the different antennas will give me the kind of direction, the northeast, southwest, that the bird is in. But I can look at the signal strength and maybe make an estimation about how far away the bird is. But we just know that it was in that particular area at that particular time, rather than the very specific location.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't need that precision. You just need to know where it was when it was, loosely.
Excellent. Thank you very much. I know Africa's got lots of really interesting questions there, but I think it might be a case of you two of you can catch up with that at university, I think,
Yes,
rather than I just noticed a lot of people are dropping out, and I know Jackson has to dash off as well. So I just finally, so I think Jackson's agreed that we'll give his little question thing a miss, and he'll send that out via email. But just very quickly, I'd like to thank both Jackson and the 3 speakers today, Wes Payne, Luke Amanda and Lucy Mitchell, for some fascinating talks. And I think what was really interesting was the fact that all of the talks related so much to the issues that we're currently facing around the Humber. And it linked very, very well back to Jackson's talk. And I could say that wasn't prepared. That was just how things happen. And I think it was great that the speakers could actually identify what issues are going on and how this technology can be used to try and address some of those questions. So in the interest of time, I'll just thank you all for attending. It's been a great turnout today. I think there's 55 people in the end. I'd like to thank the speakers again. And do you have anything else to add, Jackson?
No, the only thing is that if you do have any questions that weren't answered, if it's okay with the speakers, I'll pop your emails in the sort of roundup email that goes out to everyone, so people can contact you. If not, ping an email directly to me and I can forward it on. So yeah, it doesn't have to end here. Basically, any questions that you have, we can still ask them and you can still get your answers. So.
And the presentations will be available on, and Jackson will send the link around to how we can access those.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much, guys. It's been a great meeting. Hopefully see you all again soon.